Hi, Michael here. Well, yeah, obviously Michael here. I had Spirit for the last day or so has been, running things. Here's the thing. It's really hard to, for me now, to separate me from Spirit because I am Spirit. Spirit is me. As Jesus said, I and my Father are one. And there will be times where I'll quote the Bible. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a practicing Christian, but I did go through an 8 year experience of being a quote, there's the air quotes, quote, born again Christian. I've studied the Bible, I've taught the Bible, I ran Bible studies, the whole 9 yards. Was it, and I was in a fundamentalist church God, Bible preaching, Bible thumping church, and was into it wholeheartedly for 8 years. And then I evolved from that. And people ask me, well, first I've been phrased as a backslidden Christian, uh, but I evolved from that, and that was the next thing for me to do. And I don't knock Christians. I don't bash Christians. I don't argue with Christians. Again, as I said in my last video, you can't know what you don't know. And there was a time where, as I was going through that experience, I didn't know what I know now. I just knew then what I knew then. And it was all very purposeful. Everything's done in divine timing. As I've said before, we're all on the spiritual evolution. As Hilarious has said, the force of evolution is at hand on planet Earth. And that's not evolution in the sense of third dimensional science, Darwinism talking about evolution. This is the evolution of your spiritual self, the evolution of all things, the evolving back to source, which is ultimately where we're all headed. Paradoxically, we are all source heading back to source. In the last video, it's hard, again, cumbersomeness of this language, because it's hard to talk and speak in linear terms when one is of the awareness that the linear third dimensional is not it. When speaking from the big story, it's almost you have to speak in the now, and all things are in the now. But it's hard to convey that. If we had telepathy, I could just beam my thoughts to you. You'd get it in a heartbeat. You'd get it in the speed of thought. You know, uh, the entire concept. But because of the limitness and the cumbersomeness of this language, and this is just simply where we are now, we are all evolving towards bigger and better existences. But right now, it is somewhat cumbersome to try to talk. So I would ask your indulgence to don't beat me up because I stumble over a word or so, or I stumble over a phrase because it's hard to put it into a word that or a phrase that can be understood of you know what's in here. I was allowed to, in quotes, allowed by my quote higher self to go through that 8-year born again Christian experience so that I would have studied the Bible, studied the Old and New Testament, learn the difference between the Old and New Testament, allow myself to know what's being said, at least to my understanding at the time, know who Jesus of Nazareth is or was. I say is because he still is. Uh, One thing you'll never hear me use the phrase Jesus Christ because his name wasn't Jesus. His name was technically Yeshua, and his last name wasn't Christ. He was Yeshua of Nazareth that attained Christ consciousness. And that's the truth. Christ consciousness is a state of being, a level of frequency, basically the big story. Uh, because I try to view all things from the big story, I don't all the time. You know, I I dip into the small story and get caught up in the BS, occasionally. But that too is very purposeful because it allows me to cut myself out of the thickness and the tanglement of the small story back to the big story. And that's part of my job that I set up for me to do. I have some stories to talk about, and I'm going to just call him Jesus because that's who we all know him as. But I will always refer to him as Jesus of Nazareth. I don't like want to get all into the details of Yeshua and they call him his Hebrew name. Like you, I don't say Namaste because I'm not Hindu, but I will tell you I love you and I bless you and I thank you for your existence. For you being you. And I can just say that in plain old English because I'm an American and English is my one and only language. So that's who I am and what I'm going to speak in. I first met Jesus long before I became a Christian. And truth be told, as I was going through that 8-year born again Christian experience, I never met Jesus. I never interacted with him, only on the very surface of the quote church. And like I said, I was in a Bible thumping, Pentecostal, born again, Christian church, speaking in tongues, the whole 9 yards. But when I first time I ever met Jesus was in 1976, and I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I went to Sunday school a little bit as a child, and then after a period of time, my parents, who weren't churchgoers, they asked me and my siblings, "Do you guys like going to Sunday school?" And we kind of said no. And they go, "Well, okay, you don't have to." Uh, I went for a few years. I remember Easter egg hunts and Bible school and stuff like that on Sunday mornings. But that was the extent of my experience in a Christian church. I'd much rather read funny papers on Sunday morning, you know, uh, which I really enjoyed, by the way. I really look forward to Sunday morning funny papers. That I have a fond memory of. But I was in, I think I was in my first year of college, and I was at this girl's house that I was seeing at the time. We were laying in bed, and I just sat bolt upright, just boom, just sat up in the bed. And I looked up to like if the bed's facing the wall here and the headboard's behind me, obviously, and I sit straight up and I look up to the right hand corner of the room, and there's this white light there, and it's bright but soft. It's bright, but I can look right into it. Didn't hurt my eyes or nothing. And I heard slash felt this voice. There was and as I'm experiencing this, there's this complete calmness, like a warm blanket. This is the best way to describe it. Just was enveloping me. And I looked and I was looking at this light and I hear slash feel this voice say, You're on the right path. You will make it. And then it was gone. And it's like, wow. So I laid back down, and my girlfriend, she was laying on her, I was to the left of her, so she was laying on her left side, her arm up like this, laying in bed looking at me. And when I lay back down, the first thing she said is, what just happened? And I look and I go, you didn't see that? And she goes, no, but I saw you. So she witnessed my experience. She didn't experience my experience, but she witnessed me experiencing it. And so I told her. And the feeling that I felt like I could just run down the middle of the street and just holler and scream to the top of my lungs about how happy I was. That's how I felt. I just felt great. And then that was in 1976. And then I went through I lived my life. And in 1980, I got, quote, saved. And then in 1988, I started spiritually waking up, left the Christian church. And the reason my evolution had taken me to that point, the reason I left is because, as I said earlier, I was always into science fiction, since fourth grade. And I asked my pastor, how does the church explain dinosaurs? Because the teaching in the church was that the world was basically 6,000 years old. But I knew, because of science fiction and my exposure to that, I had always had a science-oriented mind, and I knew that there was scientific evidence, at least from my understanding, that dinosaurs were on this planet 65 million plus years ago. So I asked him, how does the Bible, how does the church reconcile dinosaurs? And he just looked at me and goes, what did he say? Dinosaurs are encapsulated between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. And I'm like, my rational mind just, I didn't say to his face, I didn't call BS to his face, but I called BS. It's like, no, no, no. That's not a good answer. I'm sorry, but that's not a good answer. And he said that with total conviction. And basically, he was telling me the same thing that the Marine Corps told me, which that's a whole different story prior to, this. But there was a saying in the Marine Corps, yours is not the reason why, yours is to do or die. Basically, shut up, don't think, and do like you're told. Well, when my pastor told me that, with the conviction and the sincerity that he did, that's what I heard. Don't question. And it's like, I can't, in my mind, I can't shut it off. It is what it is. And that's where I left the church after that. I met Jesus again, interacted with him on a first-person basis. This was in 1976, so then I would say be like 1991, 92, a bunch of years later, about 92, when I was starting my spiritual awakening journey. And my spiritual partner, my ex-wife at the time, by the way, her name is Georgianne. So I'm going to quit referring to her as my ex-wife or whatever. Her name is Georgianne. And she's a loving being, and, she's still my friend. So Georgianne and I, wow. Well, we got the direction from Spirit to go. We were already studying under Larius. We got the direction to go see this channeling in Lemon Grove, California, which is a suburb of San Diego. And we're in a big truck, so we're mobile. And so we told our dispatcher, once we got our delivery made here in California, because we ran out of Chicago, because that's where she was from, and I'm from Southern California. So we made our delivery in Southern California, and we told our dispatcher we'll take the rest of the day off. We'll be ready to load tomorrow. Well, we had made arrangements to go see this channeling or these channelers, and this is interesting now, and I'll get into that because I'm telling the story about me and quote Jesus, and so we had contacted these channelers like the day or so before because we knew we were coming to Southern California. And so we were trying to set up an appointment. And when I say channelers, because their technique of channeling was very specific and unique. It's called table tipping, and it's very involved. So that there can be, and if okay, I'll explain that in a minute. So we made the appointment, or we attempted to make the appointment, and so we were doing it as the two of us as a team. And they specifically told us, no, we don't do people together. We only do our sessions one person at a time. And we told them, well, no, that's not good enough. We've been directed by Spirit to interact with you guys specifically, which is why we're calling. Out of all the places we could have went, we were directed to call you guys, so and interact with you, and we insist that we do it together. So they said, and this was a team, these two women. And so they said, well, call us tomorrow. Let us check in with our councils, their councils on the higher dimension. Call us tomorrow. We will check in with our councils later, and we'll let you know tomorrow what our answer is. So we said, okay. Well, we called them back the next day, and they had got an okay from their councils that they would do us together. So we went down there. Now, their form of channeling called table tipping, and basically it's like what I have right here in front of me, a TV tray that you can go back and forth like that. It tips back and forth, okay? And what they would do, there would be the two of them. One person would basically, they would have, the setup would be, one of them would be standing over here at a chalkboard, and the other one would be sitting here at the table with their hands on the table, and the other being the client, for lack of a better phrase, would be sitting across the table with both persons having their hands on the table. And it's kind of like a Ouija board or something. I don't know. I've never done a Ouija board, but I think that would be the only closest. Uh, but Ouija boards have this bad connotation, so I don't know if I even want to bring that into it. But it's already said, and it's out of my mouth. So you take that with what you will, do with that what you will. But it wasn't a Ouija board, and we knew that we were clear. We knew we were clear. They knew they were clear. So we were all comfortable. Nobody had any bad vibes about each other. So anyway, the technique was the client would ask a question, and the client and the practitioner, would, hands lightly on the table, allow the table to do whatever it does. And however many times it would move or not move would be a signal. And it used basically like code, used the alphabet. A, if it tipped one time, the letter was A. If it tipped two times, the letter was B. Now it's a long drawn out process, but it's really secure because what it disallows is the channelers. Like if you say you went to a channel or a seance, or anybody that or I should say not a seance, but what's the thing, a fortune teller, or anybody you do a session with, and they're quote channeling another dimensional entity. One of the concerns is that information comes through the human, their mental filters. So this technique is so pure because the talking is being done through the client and the practitioner simultaneously. They're both participating in the channeling, the tipping of the table. And the second person, the channelers, the practitioners, I don't only want to use the frame channel, the practitioner's partner would be doing the counting and the transcribing on the chalkboard. Well, in that session, and for Georgianne and I, we were both there, present. So in that session, a question came up from me. All of a sudden, I had this remembrance that I had never told Georgianne about, of my interaction in 1976 with that white light. But I knew deep down inside of me that now is the time to ask the question. So I asked. And I asked because Sananda Kumara was present. And he was present because, I knew he was present because there were other questions and interactions throughout the session that his presence was known and he was having input. Now, Sananda Kumara is the name of the being, the higher dimensional name of the being that incarnated 2,000 years ago as Jesus of Nazareth. Sananda Kumara is the higher dimensional name of the being that incarnated 2,000 years ago as Jesus of Nazareth. Okay? So in this channeling session, I asked Sananda, I go, was that you in 1976 in Palo Alto? And I asked him with the unconscious awareness of the answer, but I was asking for a confirmation from him. And he answered, yes, that was me. So those are the two times that I know that I consciously interacted with, quote, Jesus. I've interacted with him since then on multiple occasions. But he is real because we are all real on all dimensions. And we got to keep that in mind. This isn't who you are. This isn't all of who you are. We all are vast, multidimensional beings. We have identities on different levels. I'm not known as Michael. Michael is only the energy that's the identity of the energy that's speaking to you right now. I have met multiple aspects of my higher dimensional self, and they have names. Nemish, Zeo, Atavar, Nohiorito. I have Zariah, Zariel. I have met and interacted with multiple aspects of my multidimensional self. So, again, as I said in the very beginning, you don't have to believe me, but I know what I know. And the reason I can say that in such confidence, and the reason I don't care whether you believe me, because there's nobody outside of me can tell me that I didn't experience these things. What else can I say? You weren't there. Nobody else was there. I had these interactions, and it's like, there's a phrase I use and have been using for years, and in my sharing with people, I always tell them this, and I've even said this in certain comments that I've done on the internet, in the last 2 months. Trust your data. Trust your data. Here's because your mental body will call bullshit in a heartbeat. Oh, by the way, I'm not I'm not PC. I'm not PC worth of shit. I try not to cuss too much, but I that's just who I am, but it's like I can speak clearly and plainly without using curse words, but there are some times where a good fuck you means everything, or when you call bullshit, you call bullshit. It just is what it is. Your BS meter, you can clean it up as best you want, but if your BS meter goes off, your bullshit meter just went off. Somebody's lying to you. Simple as that. And depending on how fine tuned your BS meter is, then you know, and you call it what it is. So I'm not politically correct, but I'm still comfortable with myself, and I hope you guys are okay with that. Where was I? Oh, so I told the story about Lemon Grove, and one other little side note, and I might go into this later, but there was another time where Georgianne and I went to visit some people while we're out on the road. Went to visit some people in Sedona, Arizona, which again is very purposeful that we were masquerading as long haul truck drivers because we were extremely mobile. All we had to do was ask if we had a place we wanted to go. We'd ask dispatch to give us a load there. We'd do our job, get paid to do our job, pick up the load, deliver the load, and then when we got there, or just a day or two before we got there, we would set up an appointment with whoever we wanted to visit, and we'd let dispatch know once we get delivered, get empty, we're going to take the rest of the day off or take the next day off, and we'll be ready to load the day after that. And, so it was like very purposeful. Again, we set it up that way. It didn't just haphazardly happen. There are no coincidences. Trust me, there are no coincidences. You don't have to trust me, but this is just my truth. There are no coincidences. Everything happens for a reason. Whether we in our third dimensional limited consciousness can understand it or not, everything has a purpose. So I'm looking at the timer. This is going on 30 minutes, closing in on 30 minutes. I think I might go ahead because I've got, like I said, I've got tons of data in my head. To tell my story, it's going to take a whole bunch of videos. But I'm, quote, retired. This is the next step in my evolution. This is my next. And when I retired, I knew it was my next. Now, and I'll tell that story too. It was a very purposeful choice that I did what I did. Because if I didn't, hell, I'd still be ripping around up and down the highway right now. I owned my own truck. I owned my trailer. I owned my business. I was the boss. No, I didn't answer anybody. The buck stopped with me. So it's like, it is what it is. But I knew it was time for me to turn the page and start the next chapter of my life. And this is part of it. Okay, so anyway, it may seem like I'm rambling, but everything has a purpose. I'm telling you bits and pieces, and if you understand, as I said earlier, if you want to know what I'm talking about, listen to the words I'm saying, because I'm not saying anything that's not true. I'm not saying anything, or I try not to say things that can be interpreted differently. But I understand that, each and everybody has their own filters. So anyway, I love you. I will talk to you again. I think I might be doing one of these like every other day as opposed to every day, because I've noticed on the off days, me and larger self, and I think that might be the next one, is share with you why and by whose direction I now refer to, quote, higher self as larger self. And it makes so much sense, which is why I do it. Okay? So anyway, love you. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.